Hey guys, it's Faye from SolarFlow and I am back with another video. Today's topic is a deep dive behind the veil energy read on Donald Trump. So if this sounds good, please stick around, and if not, I will catch you at another video. Now, before we get into it, I want to just recognize that he's a very polarizing figure. So to that end, there could be disagreements. And this is, of course, a channel where we respect everybody and everybody's opinion, as long as we express our differences in a respectful and high vibration manner. So to that end, I expect that they will be done that way. And this is a high vibe station. So if you are here and you want to comment, rise to the occasion and allow any comment that you make to be of a respectful kind, with the intentionality of a sharing and exchange of respectful ideas. Anything that is not high vibration, any comment will be deleted. Now, with that in mind, let's dive in. Now, when I first connected to Donald Trump's energy, it was interesting because it was shown to me that anything prior to a certain age was not necessarily relevant to this video. And I understand the complete irony, because what was shown to me with his energy started at about the age of 17. I know, ironic, but again, it's not to say that anything prior to then is not relevant or important to his overall story. It's just to say that on an energetic level, and as it pertains to this video, it wasn't deemed relevant. So that is why I connected to his energy starting at about the age of 17. And what was shown to me at that time was that Donald Trump's father had actually put him in business. But he was not put in business as a figurehead. It wasn't like, you're gonna be a trust fund baby. Here, I'm giving you this corporation. You can go sit in an office, point your fat little fingers and just start delegating to people. You do this, you do that. No, it wasn't with that intentionality at all. It was done because his father understood Donald Trump's energetic blueprint, which was that this is somebody that was born with an incredible amount of natural drive and motivation. He was also not afraid to roll up his sleeves and pick up a shovel if need be, or get to a work site at 5 a.m. if need be. He was not afraid to roll up his sleeves and get to work. And it was shown to me as a representation of a racing horse, which is that racing horses have these kind of like blinders put on around the sides of their eyes. And that is done with the purpose of preventing any distractions that they might see with their periphery vision. So these blinders are put on so all they can do is see what is ahead of them. And what is ahead of them? If they're a racehorse, it's the race that they're racing. So he energetically had the ability to just do what was required of him. Again, roll up his sleeves, and like a racehorse with the blinders on the eyes, to block everything out and go full steam ahead. Now, his father also instilled in him not only a good work ethic, but he also had this natural drive and motivation anyway. So those two energies really commingled quite beautifully together. But was also a sense of pride in doing a job well and doing it done properly the first time around. So don't make mistakes, don't dilly-dally, don't try to like cut corners and do it cheaply. Do it right, and do it right the first time. Now, Donald Trump was also shown to me as having a certain fearlessness about him that was innate to him. So if you will, it was something that he was born with. And he was also shown to me as being whip smart with a strong BS meter in place. Another way of saying a strong BS meter is the gift of clear cognizance. It's the gift of clear knowing. It is the gift of knowing when somebody is trying to bullshit you or misrepresent something, or to pull the wool down over your eyes. So he had the gift of clear cognizance. He had the innate ability to know when somebody was lying. And this, coupled with his natural fearlessness, earned him the reputation as being somebody no nonsense that was direct and to the point. And yes, he would even call people out if need be. What is another way of saying he was clear cognizant about the truth? How did we see that perhaps show up in modern times, which is the advent of him calling out the so-called false news? And again, it was the clear cognizance, the strong internal understanding that he had, the seeing beyond the veil of the mistruths and how they were being represented. Now, what was also shown to me was he had a particular gift and ability in which he could see the potential of a neighborhood and not just see it for how it was today and how it was now, in the moment, in the strictly three-dimensional, but he had a gift and ability where he could kind of like walk around a neighborhood. He would look at the kind of shops that were there, the kind of shops that weren't there, the kind of people that lived in the neighborhood, the kind of people that shopped in the neighborhood, and he could almost like on an energetic level, working with the energetic environment, understand how that neighborhood was going to shape up 10, 20 years into the future. So he was incredibly gifted and not just gambling on a neighborhood and being like, I think this neighborhood is going to succeed and be different in 20 years, but understanding because he had his finger on the pulse of it, energetically understanding how that neighborhood would actually come to be 20 years into the future. And that was something that he was actually able to teach people as well, where he could teach people to see the potentiality of a particular neighborhood. And again, not just what they were seeing with their three-dimensional eyes at that time. But he realized something that you cannot teach people. He even realized there's something that you may not be able to see on a resume or looking at people's work experience. And this was shown to me as the actual meaning and purpose in the TV show that he had done, The Apprentice. Which, sure, yes, on a three-dimensional level, the show was entertaining. We enjoyed it. If you watched it, if you were old enough to watch it at that time, it actually served a deeper purpose and meaning, which was that it was designed to flesh out through the projects that were given to the contestants. It was a way of, if you will, flushing out people's fears, in which it would then, it's not to be exploited, because that has a very negative connotation. It was not to exploit them. It was with the intention of sifting and sorting through those that were fearless, those that had something that can't be taught, which is fearlessness, versus those that would be triggered by their fears. Now, this is not to say, first of all, that we cannot improve, or we cannot get better with time, or that we cannot process our triggers so that we are not so reactive to them. It's to say that in his estimation, what he was actually looking for was this fearless nature. And his understanding that fearlessness is not something that can be taught. It's innate. You're either born with it or you're not. And his understanding was, I'm going to give you an example. Let's say, I'm going to say there's two different people. One of them is completely fearless when it comes to heights. They will go skydiving, they will bungee jump, but they're afraid of animals and they won't even go into a zoo. One could say that could hold them back from living the fullest potential they have because they won't go into a zoo. Then compare it to a person that is fearless when it comes to working with animals. They might even go and be a lion tamer. But they are afraid, they are scared shitless of heights. They will not jump out of an airplane. They will not go bungee jumping. They're two sides of the same coin. Those are both people that have potential fears. Yes, those are fears that they could perhaps mitigate. They could go to therapy for. They can explore what is the underlying reason for these fears. But they, in their genetic blueprint, have the presence of a fear. And he was looking then for somebody that was fearless. And everything on The Apprentice, therefore, was actually shown to me as, again, these specific things were designed to weave out, to flush out those people with potential fears, and those were the people that were going to be eliminated week by week, versus those that, if you will, the cream would rise to the crop. Those would end up being the two final candidates that he would actually get to choose from for who he's going to hire to be his actual apprentice. And it was also actually shown to me that the intentionality of the show was, again, beyond the scope of just looking for like the cream of the crop for his own internal corporation, but it was to bring forth onto the world stage people that, even if they were eliminated on the first week or the second week or the 10th week, whatever it was, the world was being introduced to these people as being people with very specific kind of skill sets, and that the intention was those people would actually go on to have their own success as well. So it was all done beyond the scope of it being entertaining. It was all done with the intention of having him locate people with things that you cannot teach, and things that you're not going to see on a resume, and things that you're not even going to see in their previous work experience. But looking for that certain, if you will, je ne sais quoi, that certain quality. And then not just for the gain of his corporation, but for the gain of the world as a whole, because the contestants on the show would also then go on to have their own success in life. So that is actually the true meaning and purpose of the show, The Apprentice. That the challenges were designed to be specific triggers to see how the contestants would actually navigate their fears, as well as to see how they could navigate and overcome their own potential triggers, to discover ultimately the best candidate to work for him. And what he was also looking for was for anyone that was going to come and work for him, not just somebody that came to work for him from The Apprentice, but anyone. If they were going to come work for him for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, or until they would end up retiring, it was always with the intention of having that person reach their own potential. Even if it meant that they would ultimately reach their potential and then they would leave and they would go on to do their own things. But it was, again, always with the intention of having them reach the very, very best of their own potential, the very, very best of their own possibilities, so then they could go on and they could continue to do great things as well. This is somebody that has integrity. I'm sorry if you disagree. Every time I have looked into his energy on an energetic level, I have seen him to be somebody that has a lot of integrity and only wants the best, not just for himself and his corporation, but anybody that works for him and people as a whole. And here's another way in which it was shown to me, which is he has written a number of books. And the true meaning and purpose of him writing the books was that, first of all, he really did want to help people. And it was shown to me that he felt he had found the winning code to succeed. And those were the things that he was writing about in his book. And what better way is there to bring forth this information that he thought was cracking the code of success than through a highly publicized book, because it's attached to his name. He was a very, very well-known person. So it's attached to his name, so it's going to get a lot of publicity, but it's also going to be a highly published book. So again, him writing the books was with the intention, I've cracked the code. I think this is information that will help people. I want to get it forth. I want to get it out there so I can help people. That was the meaning and purpose behind it. Because again, he is already very successful. He didn't need the success of the books. He is not somebody that has stepped away from God, right? Like if you want to go back, actually, and I'll link it down below, but if you want to go back and watch the video that I had done on the Cabal, which is the Cabal, because they have stepped away from God, they have replaced God with material things. So it's money, it's priceless antiquities, it's jewelry, it's stuff. They are trying to replace the hole in their soul of where their connection to the divine actually is with stuff. And that's why there's no amount of stuff that they will accumulate that will ever have them feel full. And the example I had given is a water bottle that has a leak in it. That every time a particular person would go to drink their water, not understanding there was a leak in it, they would just be like, there's never enough water here when I want to drink. It's because they don't know there's a hole in it. That is what is going on with the Cabal. They have a hole in their soul where their connection to the divine is. There will therefore never be an accumulation of stuff that will fill that hole. It's like a bottomless pit. But he is not somebody that has stepped away from the divine. He is connected to the divine. He is connected to God. And therefore, he doesn't need more than what he has. He's very, very successful, right? He doesn't need more than it. He has enough for not only this lifetime. He has enough to leave. His own children are successful in their own right. They have enough for all of their lifetimes as well. So the things that he has done in the three-dimensional, while yes, it could be perceived like, oh yeah, he's just getting more successful, he has the connection to God. He understands he's not replacing the divine with finite resources. It's not for himself. It is for our betterment. It is for us as well. And to that end, it was actually very, very interesting because what was shown to me was the reason that he had actually filed for bankruptcy served two purposes. And one of them was that, so on the world stage, if it was put forth that, look, even this billionaire can file for bankruptcy, it was a way of, if you will, trying to take out the stigma so that for anyone else that's of the 99%, anyone that's not like, a 1%er, anyone that's not an elite, that should they themselves have their own financial troubles, that they would need to file for bankruptcy. It was to take away the stigma. It's not to say that you're less than and that's why you're filing for bankruptcy, because look, even a multimillionaire or billionaire, he's even had to file for bankruptcy. So it was a way of assuaging the guilt or concerns of the 99%. That was one of the reasons. The other reason that was also shown to me, and he has actually said this in a number of interviews where you can go back and you can find it. He has said that it's important to lose everything that you have every once in a while so that you can see who's there for you. So he kind of did this declaring of bankruptcy was a study, it was a character study and analysis of to see who would actually be there for him. But it wasn't just when it came to business. It wasn't just who was going to have his back when he lost everything. But it was like he himself was starting to come up and evolve in his own right. He was starting to evolve on a soul level, on a personality level, on a expansion of himself as he was getting older level. So it's like every time he was on the precipice of coming to the next phase in his life, not just the next phase in his career and his success, but the next evolution of his soul, one could say, where the bankruptcy actually stood as a test to weed out those that were not having the best intentions for him or didn't only want the best things for him. The people that would turn their back on him and scorn him because now he had to file for bankruptcy. It was a way of weeding out the truly loyal people. He's big into loyalty. So this was a way of weeding out who's going to be loyal to him as he himself was on the precipice of his own next evolution in his life or in his consciousness. And this is quite interesting because what was shown to me is who was actually there for him. This surprised him too. Who was there for him more often than not? It wasn't the Society of New York. It wasn't the other elites. Who was there for him? It was actually some of the guys he knew in the mob. Interesting. Now, we're going to start to talk a little bit about the mob. Because a question had come up, which is the understanding, let's say, that we have, that anybody that has achieved a certain level of success, at least in the industry, movie, music, to get to the next phase of their career, to get to the next step, to get to a certain level of success, you have to join the club. So how did Donald Trump's father reach the level of success he had? Was it because he himself also joined the club? And this is what was shown to me. That Donald Trump's father was able to reach his success, not because he had joined the club, but because he was let's say, living in tandem with them. And in just like he had understand the nature of his son and how to work with his son's energy, that he knew he could entrust a business to his son and that his son would take it and run with it and become quite successful in his own right. And not just, you're going to sit in an office and you're going to tell people what to do, but he was actually had the drive and motivation to see things through. He also was able to understand how to work with the people that ran, for example, a city, such as the mafia at that time, how to work with them in respecting one another's turfs and also assuring it would be mutually beneficial. That the mob was not necessarily going to come, as they might have done, into a new shopkeeper's business. There's one that's doing the talking. There's one that's holding a baseball bat, tapping his baseball bat on his hand, while the one that's doing the talking is saying, "That's a nice shop you have here. It would be a shame if anything were to happen to this shop. It's really nice." Tapping the baseball bat. We can guarantee and we can make sure nothing negative is going to befall your shop. You're just going to have to pay us a service fee. We're looking out for you. You got to look out for us too. So it's actually a way of extorting money through the implicit reference that if not for them getting paid money, you're going to put them out of business or you're going to destroy their shop. It was not done this way. It wasn't like the mafia at that time were looking at his father and being like, "You want to operate in our city, you got to play by our rules." It was more like they were eyeing each other, recognizing each had their purpose, each had their function. How could they work in tandem for the mutual success of both of them? So, Trump's father would, let's say, put certain incentives in place for the mafia at that time. Let's say he was going into Brooklyn. He had a development project he wanted to do there. He would make himself known with the mob bosses of Brooklyn at that time. And I don't know what kind of conversation was had, but there was surely some sort of conversation, which is, I don't want to step on your toes. I don't want you stepping on my toes. I think we can work together and come to some sort of a mutually beneficial agreement. I'm just going to throw some numbers out there. I don't know what it is. It's more to illustrate the point here. So let's say there was some sort of a deal worked out where for whatever deal was made, whatever property he bought, whatever he developed, at the end of the year, whatever the net gains of that property was, he would have to give, let's say, like a 5% kickback to the mob at that time. But he would go above and beyond whatever that deal was. So let's say it was 5%. He would give them 10%. And he would do this because he wanted, first of all, a wide berth. I don't want you breathing down my neck. We can coexist in this city together beautifully and perfectly. I'm going to make sure that you're happy, you're going to make sure that I'm happy, and we're going to coexist together quite nicely. So that was the way in which it was done. Now, what was also shown to me was that it behooved the mafia, because they knew they were going to get a kickback, it behooved them to actually introduce him to people, kind of like, this is one of our preferred vendors. Look at it as, if you will, as you're moving up the ranks in the mafia, you would get introduced as, this is my friend, this is a friend of mine, this is a friend of ours. So he wasn't in the mafia, he wasn't getting introduced as like, this is a friend of ours. But if they knew, for example, of somebody that was looking to sell one of their properties, they would make sure to refer this person to him because they knew they were going to get a kickback of it. And that is why he also went above and beyond in giving them more than whatever was the agreed upon amount. Because in the long run, it really was mutually beneficial. He was going to get the deals that ordinarily he wouldn't have access to. He just had to make sure that everybody around him was kept happy. And that is the way in which Donald Trump's father first became successful in real estate at that time. Now, Donald Trump was raised with this same sensibility, which is this understanding you don't get something for nothing, right? I understand that somebody wants to sell this property, for example, $10 million. He wasn't going to go in there nitpicking. He wasn't going to go in there like pointing out everything that was wrong with it, trying to like lowball and bring the price down. He would actually more go into it because of the way he was raised by his father with this understanding. Not only do I want to make sure that I'm going to give this person a fair price, right? It's fair for me, it's fair for them, but also on an energetic level to have this person walking away feeling good about the deal that they had made as well. Now, let's go back to the mob for a minute, because this is actually kind of interesting. So when Donald Trump, for example, was going through his bankruptcy, when he was going through his hard times, and it wasn't the elite, it wasn't the Society of New York that was necessarily going to be there for him. Who actually genuinely was there for him was actually some of the mob contacts that he had. Because they too understood what it was like to work your way up the ranks, so to say. They understood also what it was like to live in this kind of dog eat dog kind of environment. Kill or be killed, one could say, but not like literally kill, even though the mob literally did kill. But they very much understood the hard work that went into Donald Trump's success. And that's why those were the people that were there for him. Now, what was also shown to me about the mob is that the mafia was a microcosm of how the cabal actually works. How they work and how they operate. Where there is, for example, a leader of a different area or a neighborhood, just like, for example, there's different boroughs in New York, and each of those boroughs had their own mob boss at any particular time. And then those mob bosses had, for example, their generals, their lieutenant, their footmen, and down it went, down the ladder it goes. This is a microcosm of how the cabal actually works as well. There might be, under, let's say, the 13 bloodline families, they themselves, they're like the cream of the crop. They're the top of the top. They're not doing this work. But they're going to have their footmen. They're going to maybe have like their generals and their lieutenants. And maybe their general is in charge of a certain country, for example. You're going to overlook this country. You're going to report to us. You're going to overlook this country. It's exactly the way the mob actually operates. You had let's say the mob boss of the Bronx. That was his district. That was his territory. He's got his generals and lieutenants under him. They are keeping their finger on the pulse of what's going on, and they're reporting back to him. They're assuring certain deals and certain things, but the guy that's at the very, very top of it, he is not involved in the minutia and the mundane of the day-to-day operations. It was very much anticipated, or kind of like looked at it like, I'm going to put my very, very best general in charge, and then I'm going to trust that they are doing this. I'm not going to have to breathe down their neck and oversee everything that they're doing, because I have put the very, very, very best man in charge of this. I don't need to check on him. And that is also a way in which Donald Trump's father, and Donald Trump as well, was actually able to be so successful. It was because the cabal at that time had implemented their very, very best people into these neighborhoods. What was that? It was the mafia. Because not only was the mafia a microcosm of the cabal, the mafia was part of the cabal. So whoever was in charge of that country, they're not breathing down the neck of the mafia and being like, do you have everything under control there? It was implicit. It was implied. You are the very, very best person in charge here. I don't need to be checking in on it. So, okay, cool. If these developers are on the rise, it's with the understanding that you're already working with them. We don't have to come in and intervene or circumvent or make new deals. We put the very best man in charge here. That's you. Go forth and do what we put you into this position to do. Make the deals you got to make. Stay on top of the people you got to stay on top of. That's what the mafia was. It's a representation on a much smaller scale of the way in which the cabal operates. And not only is it a representation, it's part of. Go back to the origins of the mafia, for example. Where do they come from? I think it's like Italy. Go back to hundreds of years ago, you had a cabal in Italy. So as these various families were rising to power, it was working in concert with the cabal. It's no different if it was happening in Italy than if they all came over to the United States and they started doing it here. It's all the same families. So it was always there. It's always been there. And interestingly enough, however, what actually was the true meaning and the purpose of the mafia and in their demise? So this is what was shown to me about them. The representation was, my notes are all over the place. Hold on a second here. It was, because I don't actually channel, here it is. I don't actually channel in like a linear way. I just, whatever comes in, I'm just like writing it. And sometimes it could be here, sometimes it could be there, it could be anywhere. And then when I'm doing the videos, I'm kind of like trying to bring it all together and tell it in like a coherent kind of a way. So this is what was shown to me actually about the reason in which the mafia was taken down. Okay, so it was dismantled as a red herring of sorts, or to give the illusion that big corrupt organizations were being dismantled so that the real and true power, the cabal, could go on without any suspicion cast on them. And that sometimes a smaller sacrifice had to be made below you for the good of the powers above you. And that the new mob bosses, the new generation that was coming in, were also different than the old ones, right? They, for example, the old mob bosses had a certain kind of like decorum. They weren't like brash and bold. They also understood their place. They understood that they were one piece in a much larger puzzle, but they did not run on the belief that they were the entirety of the puzzle on their own, because they understood that they were part of a cabal. The young generation that came in, they were starting to get a little out of control. They were, for example, let's say the mob boss of, I don't know the exact ins and outs and genealogy of the mafia, so please forgive me if this is not historically accurate. This is for demonstrative purposes only. But for example, if the mob boss of Brooklyn was looking over at Staten Island and he's like, I want to get my fingers in that pie. He's doing a good job over there. He's getting a lot of money. I want that pie. He would organize a hit on the mob boss of Staten Island so he could take over his turf and his territory. And the cabal was looking at this and they're like, they're getting out of control. They have forgotten their place. They think, this new generation of mob bosses, they think they are the entirety of the puzzle. They have forgotten they're only a piece in this puzzle. And the representation of it, it was shown to me, no disrespect to any old dogs out there, but it was shown to me as an old dog. So whereas, for example, you used to might have had a very, very cute dog. It was young, it was a puppy, it was cute, it loved you unconditionally. It's older now, it's losing some of its faculties, it's unruly, it's peeing on the rug all the time, it's chewing up your favorite shoes. It needs to be put down. It's unruly. This is kind of the way the cabal saw the mafia. So it behooved them on two purposes, first of all. They needed to get it under control. They were getting out of control. So they needed to put it down. They needed to get the mafia under control, while also giving the appearance that big corrupt organizations were being dismantled. It was sacrificing one of the pieces in the puzzle so that, for example, the entire puzzle could continue to get put together and to continue to thrive. And what was also shown to me was that the cabal realized that they had probably extracted all they could from New York anyway. So why not get out ahead of it, cut their losses, with the added benefit of making it seem like a corrupt mob had been dismantled, and then move on. Because they already had their sights, excuse me, they already had their sights on other places, other locations around the world that they wanted to now bring forth. And because, as we now know, it is the cabal that is orchestrating all of these very, very notable things that are happening on the world stage, i.e. September 11th, they already knew that New York post 9/11 was going to be very, very different than New York pre 9/11. So because they are orchestrating all of this, because the cabal is what, if not just the puppet master on the world stage, pulling the strings everywhere. What was, in their estimation, we've already extracted all we can from New York. Let's put down this old dog. We're going to put down these unruly guys. We're going to remind them that they're not in charge. They're going to have to go to prison. They're going to be accountable. We're going to get out from under this mess. These unruly children playing games in our turf. We're going to move on. And this is going to be like a very, very small part in this video because it actually doesn't have to do anything with Donald Trump. But when I was actually looking into this, what was shown to me was that, for example, again, according to their estimations, that New York post 9/11 was going to be very different than pre. They already had cast their eyes on a different location, a different part of the world, which was a lot of the Saudi Arabian countries, not just Saudi Arabia, a lot of the countries in that region. And for example, so recently a friend of mine was in Dubai, and she did what we all do, which is we all kind of share stories on Instagram, right? And she was sharing stories of her trip to Dubai. She was actually standing in one particular place, one particular point where they had a picture from 20 years ago. We're not talking about hundreds of years, 20 years. She was standing in one particular place. They had a picture of it from 20 years ago. There was nothing but desert. Fast forward to now, was a complete tourist destination, with experiences that you're not going to have anywhere else, with world-class shopping in 20 years' time. The level of development that had happened in Dubai in 20 years. Think about it. Pre 9/11, there was nothing but desert there. 20 years later, now there's an entire industry. By design. The cabal had already extracted all they could out of New York. Move on. Move on to the next location. Next location, Dubai. After Dubai, there's probably going to be another place, if they weren't already being dismantled, that was going to be the next place. But this is what they do. They will build up a location, extract everything that they can from it, whether it be money, whether it be louche, whether it be the energy of the people that are living there or the servitude of the people that are living there. But it is done very much with this intention of building a place up, extract, move on. Energetic vampirism, that's what it is. Now, I'm actually going to contrast that to Donald Trump again, because this video is about him. Now, Trump's fearlessness actually also enabled him to take on the cabal. And here's why. So again, I'm going to remind you that this is somebody that has good intentions for humanity. He wrote his books for the intentions of humanity, and the property development that he had done as well was done with a certain sense of, believe it or not, humanitarianism. And I'm going to explain that. So part of his industriousness was knowing that, for example, if he buys a particular property and he's going to develop it, maybe it's going to turn into a hotel, for example. Okay, what's involved in that? So you have to hire someone who's going to do the blueprints. You have to hire a contractor. You have to hire all of the workmen. You have to have the people that are coming in and dismantling anything that was there before. Then you have to bring in the people that are going to clear everything out. Then you have to bring in the people that are going to dig the dirt, and then the concrete layers. And then once you actually have the property that has been built to its full capacity, then what do you need? You've got a hotel. Now you need hotel staff. You need a kitchen staff. You need the housekeeping crew. You need the people that are working in the hotel. It's an entire microcosm in itself. So this is giving actually a great number of jobs to any one particular area that it wouldn't have had before. So while we might be looking at it on a strictly 3D level, like, oh, again, look at what he's building. It's for his success. It's for his money. Yes, I'm going to again remind you, he has not stepped away from God. He does not have that hole. He doesn't need to replace his connection to God with stuff. So he was not always doing the things that he does for the purposes of his own personal success, but it's looking kind of around the world and being like, okay, I can see this neighborhood is going to be changing in about 20 years. Let's see what can we do to help it in its evolution 20 years from now, but not just then, along its way. Now, something else that had actually come up was what really was kind of the impetus for him in wanting to do all of this was his understanding that we're living in servitude. So once he became really aware of the cabal and his understanding of it, he was kind of looking at it like, it doesn't matter how many books I write, where I crack the code. Here, read the book. You will find ways to achieve your own success in your own life. And it didn't matter how many properties he was going to buy and how many hotels were going to be built. None of that mattered, because deeply on a fundamental level, we're still in servitude. Maybe once in a while we're going to get thrown a bone, right? Like we get a tax refund. For the most part, we are slaves of the matrix. We are slaves to the cabal. And his understanding of that left him feeling completely gutted. And that is also one of the reasons that he actually wanted to take on the cabal. Now, again, what was shown to me was that in concert with his natural fearlessness was his wanting to jump into things full steam ahead, jump in with both feet, jump into the deep end of the pool. I'll learn how to swim when I'm there. But being that he is older, he tapered that natural enthusiasm, drive, and motivation that he actually has. It was tapered by checking in with his family to have them not only understand how this was going to affect them, how it may affect them potentially, but in wanting to get their okay with it as well. Now here's kind of a good time to talk about his personal life, which is as follows. So first and foremost, what was shown to me was that, because I know it's going to come up in a question, so let's get out ahead of it. He did love Ivanka, and he also loved the family that they had. He loved his kids. He really loves his kids. He loved Ivanka. He loved his kids. He loved his life, but he felt like at that time he had perhaps reached his own personal pinnacle. He had his success, he had his family, he had his kids, he had what's next? So what had happened with her was shown to me as a midlife crisis on his part. And that also, just like, for example, he would file bankruptcy because that was a character study and analysis of who would be there for him when he was on the way down, who was going to be there from when he was climbing his way back up, or as he was getting into the next evolution of his soul's mission and journey in life, right? Who's going to be loyal to me? So this was very much the same way, which was the fallout of his divorce from Ivanka was a good opportunity for him to also see who's going to turn their back on him now. Who's going to be like, you know what, Donald, you really fucked up. You imploded your family. Shame on you. I'm not going to be your friend anymore. Just for example. So it was a way for him, through this experience, to again weed out who was going to be most loyal in his life as he was going to evolve and get into the next stage. And living in New York at that time, even though I was younger, I can tell you it was definitely a spectacle. It was like, and all the newspapers were talking about at that time. And it was a huge public spectacle. But also understand that it, due to the fact of it kind of being like a public spectacle, was a great way to weed out who's going to be there for you. Who's going to have your back at the end of the day. Now, it was also shown to me that even though this was like a midlife crisis, that yes, women were his weakness. He has a weakness for beautiful women. I think that's kind of well documented. Now, women were his weakness, and he also genuinely loved kids. So he would not necessarily want to have kids out of wedlock, even though he loves kids. But it was also shown to me that if he would have had kids out of wedlock, he would have done the right thing. He would have done what was expected of him, and he would have looked out for them financially. But being that this is somebody that really loved women, when he did meet Marla Maples, he really wanted to have kids with her, a kid or more than one kid. There were certain things about her that he really, really liked. There's, things about him that he thought there would be a beautiful commingling of these energies and they would have a really, really great kid. So even though he maybe necessarily, I'm just going to stick to a more positive way of saying it. He loved Marla, he wanted to have kids with her, and because of this and because he didn't want to have kids out of wedlock, he did marry her for the purpose of having kids. Now, I'm also going to tell you that he meant what he said about Melania. He has said this in an interview. I think I saw this, who is it? Again, me with names. I don't remember. It doesn't matter. I'm not even going to try to remember. He meant what he said when he was interviewed by somebody, where he said the relationship that he had with Melania was really the kind of relationship that he was always looking for. And here's why. Melania's energy came in as very steady, very grounded, very reliable. And because of this, she actually grounds him as well. She also really lets him be himself, which he felt that none of the women that he were with before really fully, truly let. Or never, let is the wrong word. A better way of saying it is none of the women that he had ever been with prior had ever really seen him, understood him, and accepted him for who he truly was. Melania really genuinely and truly did. She looked at him, she gets him. She knows what she's getting with him. She loves him, and because she sees him, she doesn't feel the need to try to change him. She really accepts him as he is. What was also shown to me is because Melania is so grounded and secure within herself, she doesn't need her relationship with him to look a certain way on the outside. It doesn't have to make sense to other people. It doesn't have to look a certain way. She knows who she is. She knows who he is. She knows the way the relationship is going to work. She knew who she was when she married him. She knew who he was when she married him. So she doesn't care. It's almost like, think of the criticism or the opinions of other people. It just rolls right off of her. It's just like, it's all like noise to her. She doesn't even hear it. She knows who she is. She knows who he is. She is very, very content with the way the relationship functions. It doesn't need to make sense to anybody else. This is a woman who's really, really secure in herself. Understand that. Now, what was also shown to me is because she gives him the space to be himself, it was really only with her that he could have been president or the figurehead of the White Hats, if you want to look at it that way. And that it wouldn't have worked with either Ivanka or Marla because him being president and taking on the cabal required a version of himself that he could only be with Melania. So, for example, I'm just going to hypothesize. Let's say, like I had said before, he was going to consult with his family on, he wants to take on the cabal, he wants to be the president, it's going to be dangerous, this is the way things are going to have to, these are the potential things that could happen to them. Maybe a Marla Maples, for example, would have been like, no, this is just not safe, this is too dangerous, no. So whereas you might have had a Marla that is going to say no to that, Ivanka, again, seeing him clearly, really seeing him and understanding his potential and understanding what would be important to him, understanding his humanitarian pursuits in the things that he does, is somebody that was not going to be deterred by this. She's going to see him and she's going to say, I see you, I get this. Yes, I understand that this is important. Go do. You do you. Go do you. I got it under control. You go do you. What was also shown to me that her unwavering support of him, despite everything, really did give him the strength that he needed to take on the cabal, even though he had the natural fearlessness. Having her support gave him like an extra boost, if you will. And even though she knew that she was going to take a hit because of this, that he was going to take a hit tenfold, but that she never complained to him. She has her own support system for that and never complained to him because of it. This is a woman who gets it. She understood, yes, I'm going to be under fire. There's going to be people that are going to say terrible things about me. He's going to get it worse. She gets it. Now, what was also shown to me was that because of his success, because of living in New York, because of the society in New York, he also understood the dark side of celebrity culture. And he also understood the dark side of the 1%ers. Because, if you will, he might have been hobnobbing with them. He was at parties with them, he was at events with them, he was going to movie premieres. Now imagine, if you will, you're a celebrity. You have joined the club, you had to sign a contract. And now you're looking at him and his success, and you're assuming, erroneously, but you're still assuming he has his success because he made a deal as well. So therefore, people were behaving around him in such a way that they would not behave around other people. Because again, they were erroneously assuming he's successful, he must be in the club. Because I had to join the club to become successful. So he was very well acquainted with the dark side of celebrity culture. People were saying things in front of him. People were making references. He was at parties where probably things were going on. But also understand that knowing about it and partaking in it is two very different things. Now, this is actually what was shown to me in reference to Jeffrey Epstein, in case this was going to come up as a question. Yes, they did know each other. And again, yes, people were always exposing, it sounds funny, people were exposing themselves to him, but they weren't like exposing their genitalia, not that kind of exposing. They were exposing that they were in the club and what people did in the club, assuming he was in it too. So he was coming to understand the way in which these things kind of worked. And specifically with Jeffrey Epstein, as soon as he understood what was going on there, he completely cut ties with him. Now again, because he was aware of the dark side of celebrity culture and the dark side of the elite culture, which again, he didn't have to he didn't have to join the club to get his own success. He was, if you will, kind of like grandfathered into the old establishment of New York, which was at that time run by the mafia. Again, the mafia being an arm of the cabal, but the cabal being like, you're in charge of it, we're not micromanaging. So he got his own success not through joining the club. But again, being associated with the celebrities and the elites, came to understand the way in which these things actually do work. And that with it, he had an understanding of the so-called alternative ways of living in which people chose to live. Because of that, he was very open-minded to a lot of the truths and realities that had come out later on, such as, well, I'm not going to even say it. Anything that you yourself, if you have fallen down any number of potential rabbit holes, the truths that you yourself have uncovered. So he was already susceptible because he had already seen certain things, already understood certain things. So the disclosure of these things to him by the white hats in their trying to establish if he was going to be the very best fit for them to be president at the time that he was already kind of like ahead of anybody else because he already had an understanding of it. He was already clued in. And take, for example, for anybody else, certain things that you may have discovered or researched. When we found them out, for example, how you may have felt, how gutted, how depressing, how almost like apathetic we become about life after discovering certain things. Like, for example, satanic ritual abuse, Moloch, the trafficking of the little people that they're on the school bus, but there's a lot of traffic. All of those things. I can speak for myself, and probably for you too. When we find these things out, I was gutted, apathetic for a couple of months, like life lost its color. When we truly understand the way in which the world operates and how it's so fundamentally different, when we wake up from the matrix, life can be hard for a minute there. So the white hats couldn't have somebody that was going to fall apart on the job. They couldn't have somebody that was going to be like, I'm sorry, now that I know, I need 3 months to grieve the way I thought the world actually was versus the way it actually is. I can't go campaign right now. I'm sorry. They couldn't have somebody fall apart on the job. So he really was a natural fit because, again, first and foremost, he knew about these things. Second of all, he was a self-made man. He didn't need anyone else's money. He had his own. He made his own. There was no amount of money that somebody could throw at him to try to bribe him or buy him because he didn't have the loss of where his connection to the divine was that he would try to fill with stuff. Self-made, can't be bought, can't be bribed, connected to God and Source and the divine, and already knows about all of these things. Where else were they going to find that? Now, what was also shown to me was he, first of all, very much loves children, not just his own, all children, loves them. And that is why it was really one of his administration's big things they wanted to put forth onto the world stage was the awareness of those little children on the bus, and there's so much traffic where they're going. He really wanted to shine a light on the traffic that children have on their school buses. There went my pen. So, and apparently with my pen went my thought, the thought that I had there. It was a good thought too. So here's the thing. So a lot of the things that played out, for example, the exposure of the traffic on the school bus for these little kids, that was really, I was even asleep back then, right? I didn't wake up till like 2019, 2020, around there. But I remember like you could not go into an airport or a public building, or there were posters everywhere talking about the traffic on the school buses. I had never seen this before. I had never been exposed to this before, right? I was asleep. But I remember still now looking back, remembering all of these posters, now being awake, and I'm like, oh, I get it. Part of that is done for breadcrumb purposes, retroactively, so that later on, when somebody is awake, for example, they can look back with a fresh set of eyes being awake, and they can be like, oh, I get it. That's what those posters were for. It was a way of trying to, clue us in or get us to wake up. Even if it doesn't wake them up at the time, in the future, that serves as a retroactive breadcrumb for them to see and put the pieces of the puzzle together and understand the signs have been there all along. Now, we're gonna start to finish up here. And I'm gonna finish up by just sharing that, first of all, yes, every time I've looked into his energy, he really does have the best intention for humanity. And that is why, right now, it is really, really hard for him to sit back. Even knowing, he knew he was gonna, first of all, lose the 2020 election. But even knowing that now, being the position that he's in, the way his energy came in is very, very frustrated. And here's why. It's hard for him to sit back, even knowing that, according to one of the 17 drops, it had to be this way. What way is that? That's any number of ways. What's the most notable way? It had to be this way. It had to be where he was going to lose the 2020 election. So that way there was going to be the creation of contrast for us all collectively in the differences that different administrations can make. The way in which the quality of our life can actually change in a very, very short period of time. It had to be this way. Because also, here's another line from a 17 drop. You can't tell people. You must show them. I'm paraphrasing. That's not exactly the terminology. Sometimes you can't tell people, you have to show them, because only at the precipice will people change. What has the last few years been, if not a very, very long introduction to the precipice, where we will all find the will to change through it? That's not to say, even though he knew it had to be this way, and that first of all, you can't tell people, you have to show them, it's still hard for him. Now, I also just want to break it down and comment on something here that just popped into my mind also, which I've kind of spoken about in other videos. What does it also mean you can't tell people, you have to show them? It means that, first of all, you can't take over the airwaves and blast forth into the world everything that's been going on in the world. What the Matrix actually really is. That is usurping people's free will. What if this is something that somebody doesn't want to understand? You can't tell them. You have to, again, give them these breadcrumbs, if you will. You have to introduce the idea and the concept to them. So that way, should they have interest in it, and should they want to explore and fall down their own rabbit holes, they can. But that is because it is their own free will, and it is not usurping their energy, their attention, their focus. It's not telling them something that they haven't consented to being shown to them. So yes, they're very much working in accordance with the laws of the universe, the universal laws, which you're not going to usurp people's free will. And that is also what the 17 drops were telling us. It had to be this way, right? Sometimes you can't tell people, you have to show them, but not show them everything all at once. Again, you're giving them little breadcrumbs so they can kind of put the pieces together if they want to. Because only at the precipice will they have the will to change. And now that we are inching our way towards the precipice, it's quite frustrating for him. And that is why, if you will, he is doing these rallies that he has them all over the place. Why is he doing these rallies? So it's first of all, so that he can let people know he has not abandoned them. Again, this is somebody that has a high level of integrity and humanitarian pursuits and wanting the best for us. So it's to let everybody know that he has not abandoned them, and also that it's a way of directing, if you will, his own energy and his own frustration in his inability to do more, because now it's up to us. He did his part in his 4 years in office. He's not in office anymore. So it's up to us. It's in our hands now. So he is directing his energy and his frustration at not being in a position to do more right now into the rallies that he is holding, as also a way of letting everybody know that he has not abandoned us, but he is frustrated that he can't do more, and he feels for us, all of us, not just those of us that are awake. But yes, once you are awake, you kind of want to take everybody else, you want to take them by their shoulders and you want to shake them awake. And imagine how long he must have been awake for, and everything that he knows and everything that he has seen behind the veil. But also knowing, being an agent of the good, he cannot usurp people's free will. He can't shake us awake. Everything that is being done is done in alignment with universal laws. So, as always, guys, and I never do predictions, so I'm not going to predict what's going to happen, in the end, or when he's going to come back, or if he's going to come back, or if he's going to run again, or if he's going to. That's a Band-Aid. I'm not putting a Band-Aid on anybody, right? I'm not having you guys come here selling you some fucking hopium so you can put a Band-Aid on and feel better about the uncertainties of the future. We're all soul contracted to be here at this time. We all chose to be here at this time. Let's just buckle our seatbelt on the roller coaster and enjoy the fucking ride. We chose to be here. Let's just enjoy it. I'm not giving you a band-aid. You chose to be here. Enjoy the ride. So as always, guys, I hope that you have found this video to be interesting and informative, maybe thought-provoking. We're gonna keep all them comments nice and classy and high vibe. Take what resonates, leave the rest behind, and until next time, stay in the high vibration.